Okay. What's good with the YouTube? A convict's perspective. As always, man, you already know it's your boy Big Flacco sliding through, smashing on through with my co-host Big Senor Rojo. We coming in with a little bit of energy, man. Like that emoji, a little bit of energy. Let's get it cracking. So as you guys already know, man, we like to do a little bit of different topics. We like to go to current events, to past events, to RICO cases. So today what we have for you guys is a RICO case from the 70s concerning an individual who was at one time an NF lieutenant named Ruben Garnica. So it's an interesting topic about how he ended up catching a case out there, man, putting in work for the NF. It's a little bit interesting right here.
No doubt, man. And this is the court transcript from the Court of Appeals, 5th District. And the appeal came in 1981, man, and he'd already been down for a while. But here's the basics, man. The appellant, his name's Ruben Garnica, as Flacco said, Garnica. Appellant stands convicted after a jury trial of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. On appeals, he contends the following errors compel reversal of his conviction. 1, the trial court should have suppressed the prosecution testimony of one Marla Clemmer under People v. Hitch because the police failed to preserve a tape recording of the first interview with Miss Kramer. 2, the court erred by admitting evidence of an uncharged offense, attempted murder, under the rationale that the evidence was admissible to show a common plan or design. And finally, the prosecutor committed Griffin FN1 error during argument to the jury. And it doesn't give a breakdown of what that is, but the evidence in the case. In 1977, appellant was a lieutenant in the Nuestra Familia, a prison gang which was originally organized to provide security to Mexican-American prisoners, but which quickly expanded into various forms of criminal activity on the outside.
Bro, real quick for the listeners out there, right? So remember, this is during a time before the Black Bob era. So at that time, you could still have 10 captains, but you could have unlimited amount of lieutenants. So being a lieutenant was then you had your squad leaders. So being a lieutenant was an important position, but there was never any type of restrictions of how many lieutenants there could be.
Correct. Appellant's affiliation with Nuestra Familia and high rank in that organization were confirmed by Art Beltran, a former member of the family who at one time occupied the number 3 position in the entire organization.
That's rock.
Yes. Beltran gave the following testimony about Nuestra Familia. It is organized along military lines and its soldiers are promoted to higher ranks on the basis of their service to the organization. Beltran said Nuestra Familia maintains several hit lists containing names of the individuals considered enemies. Some of the groups considered enemies to the Nuestra Familia are 1, the Mexican Mafia, 2, the Aryan Brotherhood, and 3, the United White People's Party. Every lieutenant in Nuestra Familia was responsible for seeing to it that something was done about the people on this list. The higher-ups schooled their subordinates as to the identity of the gang's enemies, and a lieutenant could, on his own initiative, order his soldiers to execute a known enemy of the Nuestra Familia. Guadalupe Ramirez testified he was a member of Nuestra Familia and appellant was his superior in this organization. In March of 1977, Ramirez and appellant were together in a store when a minor confrontation occurred with a man named Robert Fuller. Fuller gave the appellant and Ramirez some hard looks. Ramirez and appellant suspected that Fuller was a member of one of the rival gangs, the Aryan Brotherhood. Appellant said he would check on him. The next thing Ramirez heard on the subject was when the appellant told him to go find Fuller and to kill him. Appellant provided Ramirez with a revolver and an assistant, Carlos Gonzalez. Ramirez and Gonzalez went looking for Fuller. When they found him at about 9 p.m. on the evening of March 24, 1977, Ramirez shot Fuller to death. Ramirez then reported to the appellant what he had accomplished, and the two men watched the TV news, to learn that Fuller was indeed dead. Marla Clemmer testified that she had worked for the appellant selling heroin and collecting money from prostitutes. She was also Ramirez's girlfriend. She was with the appellant and Ramirez when the minor confrontation with Fuller occurred inside of the store. After this confrontation, appellant's group returned to the appellant's house. Ms. Clemmer overheard appellant tell Ramirez that Fuller was an Aryan Brotherhood member and that Ramirez was going to have to hit him. Later, Ms. Clemmer heard the appellant congratulate Ramirez on the good job he had done. Evidence of an uncharged criminal offense was admitted over a defense objection based on Evidence Code Section 352. Guadalupe Ramirez testified that about a week before the appellant ordered him to kill Fuller, the appellant had also commanded him to kill another enemy of Nuestra Familia, one Reggie Garcia, a woman who had testified against a member of the Nuestra Familia. Reggie sounds like a man's name, but I'm reading it as it is. When Ramirez went to carry out this order, he was accompanied by the appellant and two other men. They had some difficulty locating Reggie, but eventually saw her with a man apparently who was her brother. Ramirez took off after the brother, but appellant directed Ramirez to just get the girl. Appellant stood back and watched while Ramirez joined the other men who were stabbing the girl. When the assailants left, Ramirez thought Reggie was dead, but he later learned that she had survived the attack. The trial judge admitted the above evidence under the theory that it was relevant to show a conspiracy in which appellant and Ramirez were involved, and which was aimed at achieving the Nuestra Familia's program of elimination of its enemies. The court recognized that this evidence was obviously prejudiced, but stated that the probative value outweighed the prejudice because the evidence related to the central issue of the case. Now, the appellant first contends that under People v. Hitch, the trial court was required to suppress the testimony of Marla Clemmer because the defense was unable to effectively impeach Ms. Clemmer's insomuch as the tape recording of her police interview on October 25th of 77, which had been lost by law enforcement agencies prior to that trial. The trial judge then noted that Clemmer was present at the trial to testify. The two officers who conducted the interview were also present, and the person who typed the transcript could be located and brought to the court to be examined as to the reason for the blanks in the transcript. Several cases held that even though there may be some possible materiality in the missing evidence, the court need not impose sanction unless the defendant makes a showing of substantial materiality. Since the defense failed to show a reasonable possibility that the missing tape had a substantial materiality above and beyond the transcript of the Clemmer interview, the trial court properly denied the motion to suppress. But yeah, I mean, this goes on, you know, and what the main thing they did, and I'll do it right here, is how these hits, although they weren't linked, the people weren't related, they went to serve a common goal, which was to further the needs and desires of the Nuestra Familia. And this is it right here. The offenses in the apparent case were only slightly more than a week apart. Hence, the remoteness factor does not foreclose admissibility. Now, as to the similarity of the two offenses and their respective victims, appellant contends that the circumstance of the attack on Ms. Garcia and her brothers are substantially different from the instant offense. Appellant points to the following difference. He was not a participant who was present during the murder of Fuller, whereas he did participate in the attack on Reggie Garcia. In the instant offense, the victim was a lone male, whereas in the prior offenses, both Reggie and her brother were assaulted. The charged offense, the victim was a member of the Aryan Brotherhood, whereas the victims of the previous attack were not identified as gang members. The victim in the present offense was shot, in contrast to the previous attack, which was a stabbing. Appellant argues that these differences require exclusion of the evidence of the attack on Reggie Garcia and her brother. Now, the court found that all these attacks, no matter if it was random, if it was an argument, if it was against a gang member, all served to get what were known as enemies out of the way of the Nuestra Familia. The court went on to conclude that the two offenses were sufficiently similar to show a common plan or design because both offenses occurred at the appellant's direction. Both involved Ramirez as a hitman, and both occurred in Fresno in March of 1977. Both offenses were committed for the purpose of killing an enemy of the Nuestra Familia. The trial court properly exercised its discretion in admitting the evidence pursuant to Evidence Code Section 1101, Subdivision B.
Now, is that a whole different case that they're using from Fresno?
No, all these activities occurred in Fresno. This is where this stuff went down. So,
Okay, that makes sense.
you know, basically, man, what the point in me doing this article is just to show that for a long, long time, they've been going after conspiracy. You know what I mean? It was all originally the RICO, all that stuff. Like a lot of people know, was made to go after the Italian mafia because they weren't having trouble busting them in the act of doing things. That's what started bringing the IRS into criminal investigations as well. But finally, to close this out, man, this is important right here. The California Supreme Court has also stated in order for Griffin error to be prejudicial, I don't even know how to say that, the improper comment must either serve to fill an evidentiary gap in the prosecution's case or at least touch a live nerve in the defense. There was ample corroborating evidence of appellant's Nuestra Familia connection. Both Beltran and Clemmer testified as to appellant's membership in that organization. There were also several witnesses who said they had seen appellant's tattoo, which showed Nuestra Familia membership. The prosecution introduced a photograph of the tattoo as well. Thus, there was no need for prosecution to stress appellant's failure to deny that he had the tattoo. It can reasonably be said that the prosecutor's remarks did not fill an evidentiary gap for the prosecution or strike a live nerve in the defense. Anyway, to make a long story short, man, all these murders, no matter what the reason was, no matter if it was Aryan Brotherhood, no matter if he was mad at somebody, no matter what the case might be, all ended up being linked to his association and membership within the Nuestra Familia. And this is what we try to stress to you guys when there's crimes being committed. You know, once you're labeled as a member of an organization as serious as the Nuestra Familia, everything you do, they are going to find a way to link that to the betterment of the gang. And that's where that RICO comes in.
Yeah, not just that, Rojo. This is how I look at it. This is a good analogy. You know, what the federal government tries to do, right, when they present these RICO cases, they get as much corroborating charges as they can get. It's like taking spaghetti and they're throwing it at the wall. They're going to see what's going to stick. So they're going to have all ducks lined up in a row and try to hit you with every single conspiracy charge, any type of active charge. Like if you go through all these RICO indictments, right, you're going to see a list of about 25 different counts. That's how they work with things. The more charges they have, the more plea bargaining that they have, the more chances they have of getting a conviction. You know what I'm saying? In this case, you know, I tripped out on this case, man, is that man Rock, Art Beltran, was pretty busy around that time. Because not only was he involved in these activities, as I think he was the second or third rate captain at that time, he was also involved in, I think, charged with the situation that occurred with Alejandro Knuckles Moreno, an alleged Mexican mafia member that got killed after he paroled from Soledad. I guess over some dope, some issues happened where he was trying to muscle in on some dope out there, and they hit him at a bus depot, from my understanding. They tried to hit, when they tried to get Knuckles, they tried to give him a hot shot, believe it or not, bro. You know what I'm saying? When that didn't work, they decided to stab him to death. Crazy ass scenario. But yeah, man, they've been trying to go over this conspiracy thing since the 70s, man. And I think what made it easier for the federal government to do that, what they noticed is that the NF had a chain of command hierarchy structure. It's why they were able to go after them first before the Mexican mafia, before the Aryan Brotherhood, or before any of these organizations. Because by having that chain of command, by having that organized bank, by having these rules and regulations in the Constitution, they were able to pinpoint that this is racketeering influence. This is corrupt organizations. That was key. That's why a lot of groups have been able to isolate themselves from RICOs that are not involved with the prison gangs by having different titles like club and so forth. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a trip, man. Like, you know, I try to stress to people, man, like, hey, okay, I'm not in no prison gang. You think, you know, you're good on the streets. You kick it with the homeboys. You're out there hustling. The government don't see it like that, man. If you're associating with the Nuestra Familia member, Mexican Mafia, AB, I'm not singling nobody out, but any group that the government charges, you know, claims is an organized crime group, if you're participating in any form or fashion, man, it could be as simple as moving money around, you know, sending money orders. It could be, you know, you're hustling a little bit, but you get your stuff from one of these groups. you know, if you're just a regular northerner, bro. You're just out there, you know, making money, kicking it with the homies, all this and that. Everything you do, if that regiment falls, if they target them people, they are going to target everyone they associate with the same way. They're not going to be like, oh, he's a regular northerner. Oh, he's a sympathizer. No, it's racketeering, influence, corrupt organization. And if you're copying, if you're moving money around, they have a charge with your name on it. And it's not going to be no different. It's not a lower level RICO charge. It's not less than anybody else is going to get, man. When you're actively programming, you're subject to the same stuff because you're going to be looked at as a member. They're not going to differentiate your rank, your lack of rank, nothing. If you're moving that shit, if you're doing, you know, bookkeeping, if you're sending letters, bro, and you send a letter that gets somebody whacked, you got a conspiracy to murder, RICO, straight up. You can plead ignorance all you want. I didn't open it. They're gonna hold you accountable, bro. I'm telling you guys. So, like me and Flacco say, like Gunner says, like everybody says, we're not encouraging or discouraging people to do anything. We're just trying to present you with the facts so you can really absorb what we're saying and realize that there is consequences. You know what I'm saying? Straight up.
Yeah, most definitely.
That's today's lesson, man. Today's lesson is no matter what you're doing, man, you could be a regular dude supporting your family 9 to 5, doing something as simple as slanging weed. Remember, selling weed's illegal federally. You do it for the benefit of a criminal organization, you got a fucking RICO off of some tree, bro. That's how easy it is. Just a little example.
Let me ask you something. Let me ask you something, right? You know, I know we're discussing all that, but from the historical standpoint, you know what makes this kind of interesting, though? This whole court appeal case right here is that it just goes to show, like back then at that time in the 70s, right, which was a very, very violent era, that they did keep lists, that they were supposed to be about that action. That, you know what I mean? They had oppositions, any enemy, whether they're Aryan Brotherhood, MA, someone owing money from taxes, that they were going to be dealt with, or they were going to have some attempts.
No doubt. No doubt. Yeah, it was cracking off, man. Like a lot of I had never previously heard of this particular individual or that, you know, particular white dude that got taken out. So this was fresh to me when I read it, man. But there's so much history from, you know, 72 to 80 that's really hard to come by. You know what I mean? Unless you know individuals were there, you get lucky. Like a subscriber sent me this, shout out, you know who you are because we're doing it. He found this one, and man, this was all news to me. I had never heard of this. I know a couple of the players involved, but this particular case, it's never been, you know, on my desk. You know what I mean? And there's a lot.
That's true, man. There's
more like this too that we just, you know, it's history that got tucked away, forgotten, never mentioned, deemed insignificant, so it wasn't mentioned. But man, there was a lot of shit going on in the 70s on the streets, in prison, trying to establish all kinds of stuff every day.
We had that graph that was from 75 to 77. It showed how many hits that were NF related. There was a whole bunch of them. I think during one year there was like 15. The next year, like 12. I think the lowest was like 5. And there was more murders by the NF out there in the streets, which a lot of them were probably NF on NF hits. But they had more murders than all 3 of the other big 4 groups total, which I kind of found was quite interesting. This was part of, I think it was the Department of Justice. It was an article that we found. It was an investigative report that was comprised of all these prison organizations. This is when they had the clampdown validation process, and they were trying to figure out how they could curtail the violence that was occurring out in the streets. So I think the report was from 1978.
Yeah, I remember. I don't remember where we found that graph. I'd like to find it again. I'm sure I got it somewhere, man. But hey, when I was, you know, being, you know, indoctrinated into the NF, man, in the mid 90s, you know, I remember learning about a lot of that stuff that went on in the 70s, you know, and I had a lot more information back then. But my focus, like I've mentioned so many times before, you know, during that time I was in Pelican Bay with Tibbs in DC, was so street specific because I was short to the house that I didn't feel it necessary to really absorb that history And, and now being older, man, I wish I would have, but I had more pressing matters at the time, that was deemed by the bigger homeboys that were more pressing. But I remember hearing a lot of stuff about how active the 70s were, man. And people were dropping like flies all over. New territories were being established. Man, they were handling their business out there in the streets, bro. Like, like crazy, dude. And that's where we're gonna find more of these indictments, man, and bring them up, man, because there was a lot going on, without a doubt. But yeah, that pretty much touches on that, man. Bringing you some history that's not well known. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and we'll be back at you later on at some point in time this evening for a live. It's your boy Rojo, Big Flacco, and we're out of here.